Betrayal cuts deeper than any knife, especially when it comes from someone you once called family. My name's John Harper. I'm 55 years old, a retired Army sergeant from Lockhart, Texas, and I gave my best friend everything: my trust, my savings, my faith. He took it all and left nothing but lies behind. But I didn't break. I didn't yell. I didn't run. I fought back with patience, with truth, and with time. And the way this ends, you won't see it coming. I've lived in Lockhart most of my life. It's a small town about 30 miles south of Austin, just big enough to have a post office and a barbecue legend or two. You've probably never heard of it unless you've driven down Highway 183 and caught the smoky scent drifting from Black's or Crute's Market. That scent wraps around the town like a memory. This was the place I thought I'd spend the rest of my life in peace. 20 years in the Army taught me how to stay calm when the world's falling apart, and I figured I'd finally earned a little stillness. I work at Hank's auto shop, an old garage with cracked concrete floors and the kind of radio that only plays country from 20 years ago. It's not just about turning wrenches. Folks stop by to talk, to sit, to remember, veterans especially. Some carry war in their eyes, and others speak in pauses. I don't say much, but I listen. And maybe that's why people trust me. Sometimes they bring coffee from down the street and just sit near the bay doors, letting the silence do the talking. My house sits at the far end of Farm to Market Road 20. One story, wood siding, a porch that looks out on open fields. There's a flag out front, given to me by my old unit when I retired. Every morning, I make a pot of strong coffee, sit in my rocking chair, and watch the sunrise melt across the grass. In those quiet hours, with the birds calling low and the world holding still, even the ghosts of Iraq fall silent. I don't have a wife, no kids. But I've got this town, and I had Mike. Mike and I met back in high school, two scrappy kids trying to outrun small-town gravity. We played football, talked about the future, spent summer nights lying on the hood of his dad's truck, staring up at stars and thinking we'd own the world someday. I wanted to serve. He wanted to build an empire. We lost touch after I enlisted, but every time I came home on leave, Mike was there, same easy smile, same fast-talking dreams. We'd grab a beer and catch up like no time had passed. When I finally retired, I came back with $100,000 in savings. Not a fortune, but enough for quiet. I wasn't looking for yachts or beach houses, just peace. Mike had turned into the entrepreneur he always wanted to be. Real estate, tech, even farming, he said. He lived in Austin, but he'd swing through Lockhart to see family. We'd meet up, swap stories. He still had that spark in his eyes, talking big, fast, like success was a train he'd already boarded. One fall afternoon, I was under the hood of a '91 Ford when Mike pulled up in a sleek black car. White shirt, neatly combed hair, that same grin. We sat outside the shop, coffee in hand, and he started painting me a picture of this project he had brewing. A sustainable farm just outside Austin. Organic produce, premium distribution, high-end restaurants. It's a golden opportunity, he said. Eyes lit up like we were 17 again. You invest with me, and we'll build something big. Together. Now, I'm not a gambler. Never have I been. The Army taught me to weigh every angle, double-check the map, and never trust blind luck. But something about the way he talked, it brought back the boy in me. The one who believed in midnight plans and impossible dreams. He didn't push. Just said he'd saved a spot for me. Because we were brothers. I looked at him for a long time. Thought about all the times he'd shown up when my mom was sick, when I couldn't sleep, when I had nothing left but memory. And I nodded. "All right, Mike," I said. "I'm in." A few days later, we sat in a quiet coffee shop near the square old brick walls, the smell of fresh bread wafting from Maxine's next door. We signed the contract, shook hands, and as I watched him walk out with that confident stride, I felt something deep in my chest, like we were finally building something real. That night, back on my porch, I sipped coffee under the stars and smiled. I saw those two boys again, feet on a truck, talking big and believing bigger. I thought we were going to conquer the world, but peace has a way of blinding you to shadows, and some smiles hide knives. I didn't know it yet, but that handshake cost me everything. I used to believe trust was something solid, earned, held, and unbreakable. But the older you get, the more you learn. Sometimes the deepest cuts come from the people you never thought would hurt you. Sitting on my porch one night, the air still in the moonlight casting silver across the fields on Farm to Market Road 20. I felt it, a shift, a disturbance. Just a few months after wiring $100,000 to Mike, my best friend since high school, the cracks started to show. Not loud or obvious, but faint. The kind of signs I was trained to spot in places where shadows meant danger. And I knew better than to ignore them. It started small. Missed calls, texts that said, "In a meeting. We'll call later." But the calls never came. Other times, there was nothing at all. I told myself he was busy. That business takes time. But something tight began to knot in my chest. A whisper, a wait. I left voicemails friendly, careful. "How's the farm coming? Mike need a hand with anything." He replied now and then, but always vaguely. "It's moving along. Just working through the paperwork." Short, detached, like I was a stranger asking too many questions. One afternoon, while I was under the hood of an old Dodge at Hank's, I heard footsteps. Mike. He hadn't stopped by in weeks. Same white shirt, same polished smile, but something was different. He moved fast, talked faster, and never quite met my eyes. We sat on the bench outside, the one near the coffee cans and tools, sipping cups from blacks. I asked about the land. "You started planting yet or still scouting?" He laughed too loud, too quick, and clapped my shoulder like I'd just told a joke. "Why are you worrying, John? It's all coming together. Just trust me." But that grin didn't touch his eyes. It bounced off them like light on glass. And right then, a quiet voice inside whispered, "This isn't right." I didn't want to see it, but the pieces were there. One evening at the HEB, I stood in line behind Bill Harper, no relation, just a neighbor. He was chatting with the cashier. Saw Mike the other day in a brand new truck. Chrome rims, full package. Looked expensive. I smiled. Maybe the project was already paying off. But halfway home, the thought hit me like a slow, cold punch. Mike told me the deal was still waiting on permits, still tied up in red tape. So where'd the money for a new truck come from? I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe he had other investors. Maybe another project. But that small knot in my gut, it tightened. Not long after, my phone rang. I was on the porch again. The sun had dipped below the trees and the air was cool against my skin. It was Sarah, a friend from high school. She sounded unsure, like she was walking on thin ice. "John, are you investing with Mike?" I kept my voice even. "Yeah, farm project, sustainable crops, restaurant supply chain." Why she hesitated. "I'm not trying to cause problems, but I've seen him in Austin spending big. Cancun last month, expensive dinners, new clothes. It just didn't sit right." She paused, "I thought you should know." I thanked her. Hung up. The coffee in my hand had gone cold again. I stared into the dark. No anger. Not yet. Just silence and a slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew. I remembered the late nights on his dad's pickup. The loyalty. The way he'd been there when my mom got sick. I thought our bond was carved into stone. But now, I wasn't so sure I ever really knew who Mike was. I needed answers, not out of spite, out of necessity. The Army taught me how to follow trails, how to find the truth when everything else was noise. I went through every email he'd sent, pulled up the contract we signed back at the coffee shop on the square, line by line, word by word. Then I called Dave, an old Army buddy who worked over at the Texas Department of Agriculture. "Can you check if there's a sustainable farm project near Austin? Permits, licensing, anything official?" He said he'd look and call me back. 3 days later, my phone rang again. "John, I ran it all. There's nothing. No applications, no land purchases, no registered business. Whatever he's doing, it's not what he told you." I didn't yell, didn't swear. I just stood there on the porch, staring out over the fields. The wind carried a trace of dry grass and something else. The weight of truth. I took a deep breath just like I used to before stepping into unknown terrain and went back inside. That night, I opened an old email from Mike, scanned the attachments again. One file I'd never looked at closely, a bank document, and suddenly, something stood out. The account number didn't match the one listed in the investment contract. I forwarded it to Sarah, asked her to take a look. The next day, she called back. Her voice was unsteady. "That's not a business account. John, that's Mike's personal checking account. Your money. It didn't go into a company. It went straight to him." I sat alone in the living room, my eyes fixed on a photo from our high school graduation. My Mike and I, arms around each other, smiling like we had the whole world ahead of us. And maybe we did. Or maybe I was the only one who ever believed in that dream. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not yet. I picked up the phone and called Sarah again. "You know any good lawyers in Austin?" She did. "A guy named Tom. Former Marine. Office on Congress Avenue." I set the appointment for Saturday. When I hung up, I looked out the window. The moonlight still spilled across the fields, but the peace I used to find in that light was gone. A storm was building, and I was done waiting. The truth doesn't always hit you like a gunshot. Sometimes it creeps in slow, cold and quiet like a winter wind slipping through the cracks of an old house. That's how it felt the night I sat in my living room, staring at the bank statement Sarah sent. The numbers were right there in black and white. $100,000. Every cent I'd saved from 20 years in uniform. Gone. Not invested. Not growing in some field outside Austin. Just sitting in Mike's personal account like it belonged to him all along. The man I'd once called my brother had lied to me, used me, and walked away like it didn't cost a thing. But I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even move. I just let it settle slow and heavy like I used to when bad news came over the radio in Iraq. No panic, no noise, just gravity outside. The street lamp cast a soft yellow haze over the yard. Lockhart was asleep. But in my head, everything was moving, fast. I thought about Mike, about the boy I met at Lockhart High, the one who used to share soda and dreams on the hood of his dad's truck. I thought about how he'd sat with me when I came home broken, when I couldn't sleep without hearing the sandstorms of war echo in my chest. That version of Mike felt like a ghost now, replaced by someone else. someone I didn't know. Someone who didn't know me. The pain wasn't loud, it was the kind that sits deep in your chest, like a weight you carry long after the mission ends. I reached up and took down the old photo from graduation. And Mike, 18, grinning like we owned the sky. I looked at it for a long time, and I didn't feel anger. What I felt was grief, the quiet kind. The kind you feel when something that once meant everything slowly fades into something you can't reach anymore. I set the photo down face up and made a choice. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to scream or ask why or give him the satisfaction of knowing I'd caught on. The Army taught me that the best move is the one your enemy never sees coming. I got up, poured another cup of coffee, and opened my notebook at the kitchen table. The house was still, just the low hum of the fridge and the soft creak of old floorboards. I started writing everything down: emails, texts, every conversation I could remember. I pulled out the contract from the coffee shop on the square. I read every line twice. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew how to prepare. You don't move until you've studied the terrain, and I was building a plan. The next morning, I drove into Austin. Tom's office was on Congress Avenue, just above an old bookstore with a view of the Capitol Dome in the distance. He was in his 60s, a former Marine, with a sharp eye and a handshake like steel. The kind of man who'd been through things and knew how to read a room before stepping into it. I laid it all out calm, clean, no emotion. The emails, the contract, the bank statement. What Sarah told me, what Dave confirmed. I didn't call Mike names, and I didn't make it personal. I gave Tom the facts like I was briefing a mission. When I finished, Tom leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "John, you've got a case. Fraud, breach of contract, maybe more. That bank statement alone is a smoking gun. But we need to close the gaps. Build the wall tight enough so he can't climb out of it." I looked him in the eye. "So what do I do?" He didn't hesitate. "Stay quiet. Don't tip him off. Keep acting like everything's fine. And gather more texts, voicemails, and even small talk. If he thinks you still trust him, he'll get careless." Driving back to Lockhart, Tom's words echoed in my head. Stay quiet. Act normal. I'd done it before in worse places with more at stake. I could do it again. I pulled into my driveway, walked inside, and went through my phone. I saved every message. I found a few old voicemails from when the project was new. Mike was talking fast and full of energy. "John, this is gonna be huge. You're gonna be proud you got in on this. I played them once. Then I saved them to a folder labeled evidence. I sent him a text, friendly, easy. How's the farm coming? Can't wait to see what you're building." He replied the next day, "All good, man, just sorting out permits. Update you soon." I saved that too. A week later, I called him. Let him talk. Let him lie. Meanwhile, Tom gave me a small device to record every word. It didn't feel good recording my best friend like he was a suspect, but I reminded myself he wasn't my friend anymore. He was the man who took everything and smiled while doing it. I kept working at Hank's auto shop, changing oil, fixing brakes, laughing with customers. Nobody knew, and I wanted it that way. This town talks fast, and if the wrong whisper reached the wrong ear, everything could fall apart. So I smiled, poured coffee from the dented pot by the register, and listened like I always had. But inside, I was on a mission. Every night, I reviewed my notes, checked timelines, matched messages. I felt like I was back overseas, prepping for a night patrol, knowing one mistake could cost everything. One afternoon, I was under a Chevy at the shop when I overheard a guy at the counter mention Mike. Saw him at Black's last week. Said he's got big investors lined up in Austin. I slid out, wiped my hands, and asked without blinking, "Oh yeah, what's he working on?" The guy shrugged, didn't say much, just that it's blowing up. I nodded, said nothing. But inside, I felt it twist. Was I just one of many another name on his list that night? I added it to my notes. The following Saturday, I met Tom again. We sat in the same office. I handed him a folder labeled organized, time-stamped, texts, voicemails, recorded calls, a full timeline. He flipped through the pages slowly, nodding. "This is good," he said. "Really good. He has no idea what's coming." I didn't smile. Just leaned back and asked, "What's next?" He tapped the folder. "Now we track the money. If he's living large, he's leaving footprints. We follow them. And when we've got it all, we bring it down on him legally." Driving home, the road stretched ahead of me long and straight. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt focused. I wasn't just fighting to get my money back. I was fighting for the part of me that still believed in right and wrong. Mike hadn't just stolen my savings, he'd stolen trust, loyalty. Years of brotherhood, I thought, were real. But I wasn't going to let him keep them. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. The house stood quiet, the fields behind it glowing under the moon. I stepped onto the porch, took a breath, and looked out into the dark. I wasn't angry, I was ready. Mike thought this was over, but he had no idea. I was just getting started. I learned a long time ago that the hardest battles aren't fought with fists or rifles. They're fought in silence at night, when your mind is loud but your voice stays still. That's where I found myself, sitting alone at my kitchen table in Lockhart, Texas, a cold cup of coffee beside me. A notebook full of evidence is in front of me. The truth about Mike wasn't a shock anymore, it was a weight, heavy. Solid. My $100,000 wasn't growing produce outside Austin. It was fueling someone else's lies. But this wasn't going to be the end of my story. I was building a plan. Quietly. Deliberately. Like I'd done 100 times before, in places far more dangerous than this. The house was still that fall, just the hum of the fridge and the occasional call of a night bird cutting through the dark. Outside, Lockhart rolled on like nothing had changed. The smell of barbecue still drifted from Black's. People waved from porches. The town breathed in routine, and I followed suit. Every morning, I'd drive down to Hank's auto shop, get my hands dirty under a hood, and share a laugh with the regulars. I nodded along when folks talked about the weather or Friday night football. No one knew the fight I was waging. And I needed to keep it that way. Tom, my lawyer in Austin, made it clear. Keep him comfortable, John. The quieter you stay, the more careless he'll become. So I did exactly that. I'd text Mike now and then, keeping the tone easy. "Hey, looking forward to seeing the farm when it's ready." He'd reply with the usual smoke. "Almost there, just working out the final pieces." I saved every message, every word. I even called him once and let him talk about investors and permits while I recorded the call. It didn't feel good, treating the man I once called family like a suspect. But then I'd think of the bank statement, and the doubt passed. Tom told me to gather everything: texts, documents, anything that tied Mike to the lie. So I dug deep, pulled every email from my inbox, printed them out. I found our contract again, the one we signed at the coffee shop on the square. It still smelled faintly like fresh bread from Maxine's next door. I made copies of the wire transfer, 100 grand, right into his personal account. I even wrote down what I remembered, little things he'd said over coffee. bragging about big plans before the deal even existed. One piece at a time. Loading up. But this wasn't just about building a case. It was about protecting what I had left. I had a small savings account separate from the investment, and I wasn't taking chances. I drove to First Lockhart National, met with Mary, the kind of teller who knew your dog's name and asked about your truck. I told her I needed to move my money into a new account, quietly, one Mike couldn't see. She didn't ask why, just nodded. Set it up, and as I signed the forms, she looked at me and said, "Whatever's going on, John, you're doing the right thing." I thanked her, my throat is tight, and walked out with just a little more weight off my shoulders. Every Saturday, I'd drive to Austin with a folder tucked under my arm. Tom and I would sit in that small office above the bookstore, the city noise fading to nothing as we laid everything out on the table. He was sharp, military sharp, clean, tactical. "You've built a strong case," he said one day, tapping his finger on a list of charges. "But we need to tighten it. If he's spending your money, he's leaving a trail, and we're going to follow it." I nodded, because I knew what that meant. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, just like before a mission. Steady breath, no wasted movement, no room for mistakes. Rumors started to fill in the gaps. One day, I was under a Chevy when I heard a customer mention Mike, saw him at a bar in Austin dropping bills like water. I kept my head down, but my ears were sharp. Later that week, I asked Sarah, my old classmate at the bank, if she'd seen anything else. She hesitated, then admitted she had. Luxury hotels, fancy restaurants, a condo deposit. She leaned in and lowered her voice. "It doesn't add up, John." I nodded, jaw tight. It added up to me. Tom said we'd subpoena Mike's record soon. If he's using your money to fund his lifestyle, that's fraud, clean and simple. I didn't smile. I wasn't looking to ruin Mike's life. I just wanted back what was mine. And I wanted the truth to have a voice louder than his lies. Then one night, Mike called out of the blue, sounded cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "Project's moving forward. John, gonna be something big." I leaned on the kitchen counter, my eyes fixed on the photo of us from high school, still sitting on the shelf. "Glad to hear it," I said, calm as ever. "Keep me posted." I hit record, filed it away. Another piece of the puzzle, and afterward I just sat there in the quiet. The man I once trusted more than anyone had taken everything I'd built, and somewhere along the way, he'd taken a piece of who I was. I started preparing for the long haul. Went back to Mary at the bank for financial advice. She helped me set a tighter budget, just in case this dragged on. I cut back on extras, no more weekend brisket at Black's, no more new tools for the shop. I started thinking about the future, visited the community center. I asked about programs for veterans, things I might help with, maybe even build if the money ever comes back. I didn't tell them why, just said I was planning ahead. They nodded. They understood my kind of silence. Each night, I'd sit at the table, the same one where this all started, notebook open, notes updated, voice steady, eyes on the horizon. It felt like prepping a patrol, knowing the road ahead was rigged, but walking it anyway. I'd look out at the fields, bathed in moonlight, and remind myself why I was doing this, not out of spite, but out of principle. Mike thought I was done, that I was just another good man too proud to fight back. But that was his mistake. One Saturday, as I was leaving Tom's office, he handed me a folder, a draft of the lawsuit. "We're almost there, John," he said. "Just a few more pieces, then we strike, and he won't see it coming." I nodded, gripping the folder tightly. Drove home with the windows down and the fields wide open under a steel gray sky. I didn't know what the next month would hold, but I knew what I was made of. I'd worn a uniform before. Now, I was wearing the truth, and I wasn't going to let Mike take that from me. The waiting was the hardest part. Not the gathering of evidence, not the silence I'd kept for months. No, it was the stretch of time after everything was in place. The moment before things shifted. It felt like standing on a cliff, not knowing if the ground beneath you would hold or give way. I'd built the case, every message, every recording, every lie Mike had wrapped in friendship. Now I had to find out if the truth would hold its weight. I was still in Lockhart, still living out the rhythm of my quiet life on Farm to Market Road 20. Mornings at Hank's Auto Shop, coffee breaks at Black's Barbecue, nodding along to talk about Friday football and summer heat. But inside, I was braced. This wasn't war in the desert, it was war in a courtroom, and I was ready. Tom filed the lawsuit in the Travis County District Court, a glass and steel courthouse off Guadalupe Street worlds apart from Lockhart's wood porches and gravel shoulders. The day Mike got served, I was under the hood of a Ford, elbow deep in grease. My phone buzzed. Tom's voice was steady. "It's done. John, he has the summons. Court dates are set for next month." I wiped my hands on a rag and stared out at San Antonio Street, where the sun baked the pavement and a kid rode by on a rusted bike. "What now?" I asked. "Now we wait," Tom said. "But don't flinch. Keep steady." I didn't flinch. Not anymore. A few days later, Mike texted me out of the blue, friendly, casual. "Hey John, just checking in. Farm's coming along." No mention of court. No sign he knew I'd seen through him. I stared at the message for a while, thumb hovering, then typed back, "Good to hear. Keep me posted." That was the last time we ever spoke. I didn't respond again, didn't reach out. I'd already said everything I needed to say in the voice recordings, in the bank statements, and in the legal documents Tom had delivered like a final salute. The morning of the hearing came gray and cool, early spring. I drove the 30 miles to Austin in my old pickup, the engine humming low along Highway 183. I wore my only suit, a navy one I hadn't touched since a cousin's funeral. It felt stiff across the shoulders, unfamiliar. But I buttoned it anyway and kept driving. The courthouse loomed ahead, glass, steel, sharp edges. Tom met me at the door. His suit was pressed. His briefcase was locked and ready. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "Let's get this done." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Wood benches, quiet air. A judge's desk polished smooth by years of hands and stories. I sat beside Tom, my hands folded, eyes forward. When Mike walked in, my chest clenched. He wore a gray suit, tie straight, hair slicked back, but his eyes darted, nervous, like a man caught in his own trap. He glanced at me for a second. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just looked. Let him see what he'd tried to break. He looked away first. When the hearing began, Tom stepped forward. He spoke like a soldier giving a report. Clean, direct. Every point sharpened. "Your Honor," he said. "John Harper trusted Michael Reynolds with $100,000. That trust was built on a lie. There was no farm. There was no project. Just fraud." He showed the judge our contract, the bank transfers, the screenshots, the recordings, my voice steady. Mike's full of stories, words like permits and soon never led anywhere. The judge listened, writing in slow loops, her face unreadable. Mike's lawyer tried to push back, called it a misunderstanding. Said Mike had every intention of building the project. claimed the delays were normal, but Tom had more. He laid out the financial trail Cancun, the luxury condo, the dinners in Austin. This wasn't a business delay, Tom said. It was a lie that bought vacations and real estate. This wasn't hope, it was theft. And for a moment, the room felt still. Then it was my turn. I stood, looked at the judge. My voice didn't shake. Mike was my friend for 40 years. I gave him everything because I believed in him. He looked me in the eye and took it anyway. I'm not asking for sympathy, I just want what's fair. Then I sat. I didn't look at Mike. I didn't need to. When he took the stand, it was like watching a man try to outrun a story that had already caught up to him. He said the project was still in motion, said he meant to pay me back. But when Tom pressed on the bank statements, on the missing permits, on the phantom land, Mike's voice got smaller. By the end, all he had left was, it was a misunderstanding. Even the judge looked tired of hearing it. Her ruling came faster than I expected. She leaned forward, spoke clearly. Mr. Reynolds, the evidence is clear. You misrepresented your intentions and misused the plaintiff's funds. This court rules in favor of Mr. Harper. She ordered him to repay the full amount, plus interest and fees, $120,000. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Tom clapped my shoulder, the corners of his mouth turning up for the first time. We got him, John. As we walked out of the building, I saw Mike standing by the elevator. His shoulders slumped, his tie was crooked. He didn't look at me, and I didn't stop. Outside, the city moved like nothing had happened. But for me, something had. I walked to my truck, slipped into the driver's seat, and sat there for a long moment. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Like a storm had passed, but the sky hadn't cleared. The road home stretched wide beneath the spring sun. The fields glowed, and the wind rolled easily across the grass. I thought about the money, but more than that, I thought about the years behind it, the hours, the missed holidays, the years of believing that loyalty always meant something. It wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about closing a door that needed to be shut. Mike had taken more than $1. He'd taken a piece of my trust, under him, but he hadn't taken my discipline, or my sense of right, or my name. When I pulled into my driveway, I looked out at the fields one more time, the same land, but I wasn't the same man. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Winning the lawsuit didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no rush of triumph, no urge to raise a glass or tell the world. It felt quieter, heavier. Like setting down a weight you've carried too long, not with celebration, but with relief. The court awarded me $120,000, my original 100 plus interest and fees. But the money wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed was what it cost. The courtroom on Guadalupe Street had exposed Mike's lies, and the gavel had sealed the truth. But as I drove back to Lockhart along Highway 183, the golden fields stretching under a soft spring sun, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. A chapter closed. The scar is still there. Life went on. I went back to Hank's auto shop on San Antonio Street, wrench in hand, grease on my sleeves. The town didn't know much. Lockhart's rumor mill hadn't picked up on the lawsuit yet, and I didn't plan to feed it. I wasn't interested in dragging Mike's name through the mud, not out of kindness. Just peace. I hadn't fought for revenge, I'd fought for the truth. So when folks came by with coffee from Black's and asked how I was doing, I'd smile and say, same as always, and that was enough. But in a small town, the truth has a way of getting out. A few weeks after the ruling, I was at the H-E-B picking up groceries when Sarah pulled me aside. Her voice was low. "John, I heard about the case. You all right?" I nodded. Eyes on the cart. "I'm fine. Just glad it's over." She squeezed my arm. Soft but steady. "You did the right thing. Not many would have handled it like you did." I thanked her and moved on. But those words followed me home, because they weren't about the verdict. They were about how I carried myself. And somehow, that meant more. I never heard from Mike after the trial. I didn't expect to. Word around town said he sold his truck and left, maybe Oklahoma, maybe farther. I didn't ask. I didn't care. But one night, sitting on my porch, moonlight drifting across the fields, I thought about the boy I met at 18, the one who'd laughed with me on his dad's truck, who showed up when my world fell apart, that Mike was long gone, long before the court date. And that night, I finally let him go. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote him a letter not to send, just to say it out loud. "You took my money," I wrote, "but you won't take my trust in people. I forgive you, not for you, but for me. I won't forget, but I'm moving on." The words came slowly, each one a step through dry sand. When I finished, I walked out back, lit a small fire in the old metal drum I used for leaves, and dropped the letter in. No ceremony, no speech, just silence and smoke rising into the night. I didn't tell anyone, not Sarah, not Tom. That moment was mine. But something shifted after that. I started noticing things again, the way the sunrise hit the fields, the sound of kids laughing down the road, the familiar rhythm of Lockhart. The town hadn't changed, but I had. I wasn't carrying the betrayal anymore. I'd finally set it down, and the lightness that came with it surprised me. Folks in town started treating me a little differently. They didn't say why, but I could feel it. At the shop, customers lingered longer. Some brought cookies. Some asked for advice they didn't really need. One day, old Mr. Jenkins handed me a thermos and said, "You're good people, John. Always have been." I nodded, unsure what he'd heard, but thankful all the same. It wasn't about the lawsuit. It was about how I stood when things got hard. I could have made it a story. The Lockhart Post reached out. A young reporter named Clara asked to sit down for an interview. She'd heard courthouse whispers and thought it might make a splash. We met at the coffee shop. She had a recorder and a notepad, ready to dig in. I took a sip, let the smell of fresh bread from Maxine's fill the air, and said, "There's no story here. It's done. And I'm moving forward." She pressed. I stayed firm. I didn't need Mike's name in the paper. I didn't need this town picking sides. I'd already gotten what I came for: justice, not a headline. That choice felt right, like saluting a fallen comrade instead of cursing the enemy. Mike had made his bed, and wherever he was now, I wasn't going to throw more dirt on it. I had my house, my porch, my mornings with black coffee and quiet skies, and I had the respect of people like Sarah, like Mr. Jenkins, even Tom, who called a week after the ruling and said, "You're one of the good ones, John. Not many men stay that steady." I thanked him, my voice soft, then hung up. The money was in my account at First Lockhart National, $120,000. But it didn't feel like a prize. It felt like a responsibility. Something I'd earned not just with evidence, but with silence, with discipline, with choice. I hadn't fought just to win. I'd fought to remember who I was. And now that it was over, I wanted it to mean something. I sat down with Mary from the bank and asked her what came next. She mentioned investments, a new truck, maybe home upgrades. I listened, nodded, but none of it felt right. That money didn't just belong to me, it belonged to the fight, to the part of me that didn't let betrayal take the last word. I told Mary I'd think it, but deep down, I already knew. That night, I sat on the porch, the air thick with the scent of cut grass. The stars were sharp above me, the kind of sky you only get when you're far from city lights. I thought about the men I served with, the ones who came back and felt lost. I thought about the customers who came by the shop, looking for more than just repairs. And in that quiet, an idea came. Not a speech, not a mission, just a seed, a way to make what happened matter. I went inside, picked up my notebook, and I started writing not a letter this time, but a plan. The money was just the beginning. The sun still rises over the fields on Farm to Market Road 20, just like it always has. Every morning, I'm out on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the light spill slowly and golden across the grass. It's been months since the courtroom in Austin, since I won back the $120,000 Mike took from me. That fight feels distant now, like thunder rolling off the horizon after the storm has passed. But it left a mark, not loud, not angry, just a deeper understanding of who I am and who I'm not. I'm not the same John Harper who trusted blindly. I'm stronger now, not because I got my money back, but because of what I chose to do with it. The money's sitting safely at First Lockhart National Bank, but I didn't let it sit long. I'd fought too hard for it to let it collect dust. I kept thinking about the vets who rolled into Hank's auto shop, dropping off coffee from Black's barbecue, trading stories while I checked their brakes. Some were still trying to shake the war off. Others were just looking for a reason to get up in the morning. I'd been lucky. Lockhart gave me that reason. I figured it was time I helped give it back. So I sat down with Mary at the bank, in her little office with the pictures of her kids on the desk, and told her what I had in mind. "You could invest it," she said. "Buy yourself something. You've earned that." I shook my head. "I want to build something for other vets, folks who need a leg up." She smiled, like she already knew that's what I'd say. And just like that, the Harper Fund was born. Not a big charity, no fancy mission statement, just a hometown effort to help those who served find solid ground. I partnered with the Lockhart Community Center over on Church Street, talked to Ms. Elena, the director. Sharp woman, kind eyes, knows how to make things happen. I told her I wanted to start a skills program for veterans auto repair, welding, even budgeting classes. "A lot of us come back feeling lost," I said. "I want to help them find their way home again." She nodded without hesitation. "We'll make it happen. John, Lockhart's behind you." The first class launched a few months later. I used the money from the lawsuit to cover gear, supplies, and instructors. I teach auto repair myself, standing in a borrowed garage, sleeves rolled, showing how to tear down a carburetor or bring life back to a dead engine. Most of the students are younger. A few are fresh from Afghanistan or Syria, eyes that say too much, even when their mouths say nothing. I don't preach, I listen. That's where the healing begins. Over socket wrenches and oil-stained rags, they start to talk about bad nights, burned bridges, and what hope still looks like. I tell them the truth. You're not broken. You're building. One of them, Ethan, stuck with me. 28, came from Kandahar carrying more than just a duffel bag. When he walked into the garage, he barely looked up. I handed him a wrench and said, "Pull that spark plug." Didn't push, didn't ask, just worked alongside him. A few weeks later, he brought me a pecan pie his mom had made. "Mr. John," he said, voice steady for the first time. "You're the first person who made me feel like I could do something right." I clapped his shoulder and told him he already was. But inside, I felt something shift. That moment, that was why I fought for the truth. That was the real return. We've got 15 veterans in the program now, and it's growing. The center's not just a place to learn anymore, it's a place to belong. After class, we sit around and talk. Real talk. The kind that rebuilds trust one sentence at a time. Ms. Elena tells me we're changing lives. I believe her. Carla, one of our welding students, just got hired by a hardware shop on the town square. She came in grinning like she'd won the lottery. Didn't think I'd ever matter to anyone again. She said, I told her she never stopped. I still fix cars at Hank's. Still wave to kids biking past San Antonio Street. Still breathe in the barbecue smoke that drifts through Lockhart like a hymn. But the way I see this town has changed. It's not just a place I live, it's a place where something real is being built. Folks have noticed. Mr. Jenkins dropped by the shop with a check for $200. For the vets, he said, "You're doing God's work." I didn't say much, just nodded. But it meant the world. I don't think about Mike much anymore. He's a name in a file, a shadow on a brighter road. Word is he left town. Maybe he's in Oklahoma. Maybe he's still running. That's his burden now. He took my money. But in doing that, he gave me something more valuable, a purpose, a direction. I could have let that betrayal sink me in, but I didn't. I built something with the ashes. That's what the Army taught me. You keep moving and you adapt. You overcome some nights after a long class. I sit out on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the stars scatter over the quiet fields. The air is still. The world, for a moment, feels right. I think of Ethan's pie, Carla's job. The others are slowly finding their footing again. I think about how 120,000 became more than numbers in a bank account. It became a bridge. Once we're walking together, one honest step at a time. I'm still John Harper, still a soldier in my bones, but now I'm a builder too of engines, of lives, of something bigger than revenge. I don't know what the next year holds. Maybe this little program will grow. Maybe someone else will carry the torch. But I know I'm not done. There's more to give, more to teach, more to heal. Mike's betrayal was a fire, but it didn't burn me down. It forged me into something better. And if you've come this far in my story, thank you. If it meant something to you, if you've ever been knocked down or felt alone, know this, you're not. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe and stick around. There are more stories from Lockhart to come. Real ones, hard ones, true ones, and maybe one of them will be yours.